Welcome to Nuanced Beauty. This podcast is intended to be a spot where my husband Bill and I will capture some complex thoughts and challenge us to hold to our opinions loosely so that we can see the beauty in others and the beauty in ourselves. I want to challenge us to dive deeper into those everyday topics and those sticky topics that we might shy away from, or we might bulldoze over others with our opinions. Because I think there's wisdom in this idea that if we all thought exactly the same, there would be no need for anyone else. So let's have a conversation and let's get nuanced. Welcome back to Nuanced Beauty. This is Christina and Bill here.
Hey, everybody. So we thought, and by we I mean Christina, in honor of International Women's Day, we were going to talk about superfluous holidays.
Yes.
And I'm going to continue to throw Christina under the bus, so I'm not the one that's called sexist. But that caused Christina to start looking through our calendar. And Google Calendar is nice enough to tell us all of the observances through the year.
So interesting thought, though, I'll put out there. This was not at the heels of International Women's Day. That was just the thought that reminded me that like earlier this month, I stumbled across the number of observances.
Well, that ruins the joke, though.
Oh, well, it's still a clever
It
joke.
doesn't have to be true.
Yeah, that's valid. But I'm so literal sometimes.
Sometimes.
All the time. Which ties us in. Did you have any further thoughts?
No.
Or you want me to take it away? I'll take it away.
Take it away.
All right, guys. So the topic for this episode I'm bringing up because let's go back to the heart of what is the point of nuanced beauty. And I want to talk about anything and everything. And one of the things that cues me in to pay attention is I am observing how I personally react to things. And if something is abrasive or I want to shut something out or I feel like, I don't know, I wouldn't even say it's not offended really because I'm not offended. I'm just
No, but your hack is
pushback.
going.
Yeah.
You feel a sense of contrarianism, or feel a sense of, I'm drawing a blank on the word, but you feel a sense you want to push back against something.
Yes.
And you want to unpack why that is.
Yes.
Because it's usually a feeling that's not invalid, but it's not.
But it's more complicated than what meets the eye, and maybe I should lean in instead of pushing back.
Exactly, and this whole podcast serves as a little bit of therapy for us to rant and really talk ourselves out of
creating firm lines where there doesn't need to be one.
Precisely. So we're looking at this calendar, and we're realizing that almost every month has some observance ascribed to it.
Yeah. So I'm pulling up the calendar actually, and I was trying to schedule something, and I use color coding. And I currently do not use the color green because I do see that green is for holidays. But I'm looking through, and so February is Black History Month, March is Women's History Month, May is Asian Pacific Heritage Month, June is Pride Month.
July is a hangover from Pride Month because that's the party month.
And then September 15th is first day of Hispanic Heritage Month.
Which I find interesting that they wouldn't start. Yeah.
So that's a little bit of
I feel like with the rising population of Hispanics in this country, we'd at least give them an actual full month.
Yeah, not just September 15th and on. I don't know.
Unless it's a month that goes from the 15th to the 15th. Does it just give you the end of the Spanish History Month?
Yes. So that is my initial observation that occurred earlier this month was, wow, we have a lot of months. And then International Women's Day happened too. And I was listening to maybe an Instagram reel of someone in Europe, someone in leadership in Europe. And this gal was sharing like how not it shouldn't just be one day a month. Like, this is a great start, and I don't even know if she said this is a great start, but I think she actually just said, we shouldn't just like equate this topic to one day. And so, the flaw or the thing that I want to push back against with these observances is I think that they dilute the water and they don't actually tangibly create appreciation for the thing that they're supposed to draw attention to.
No, and I think you're right. However, as I've been kind of thinking through this topic over the last couple of days, it begs the question: who did this? Like,
Yeah.
like
Like, who created,
who created? And
what was the agenda behind it, or
well,
why?
not even the agenda. I don't mean to be sinister about this. It's the question of who actually has the authority to dictate these holidays, and
Mm,
these are all probably um, uh,
government,
yeah,
like
well, executive orders from.
executive. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause that's one of the purposes of the executive order is to commission national parks and holidays, and we that's a whole other topic how we use executive orders. But uh,
Mhm.
so we have a population of people who want to do a good thing. You
Mhm.
want to recognize the role of women in society in a way that you might feel that they aren't.
Mhm.
And so you're going to point to the authority figure and say, "Hey, Mr. Authority Figure, what are you doing to solve sexism?"
Mhm.
And that authority figure is going to say, "I don't know how to solve institutional sexism. I
That's a
have
big
I have
topic.
two tools in my toolbox. One's to tax people, and
Or
the other
create
one
orders.
is to create bullshit holidays." And so when
Ah,
that elected official goes for reelection and they ask them, "Hey, Mr. Official, what do you do to promote Asian Pacific Islander heritage?" They say, "Well, I'm so glad you asked. I created the Asian Pacific Heritage
appreciation month.
Appreciation Month." And is it helpful? Probably not. But
Right.
what is he supposed to do? What is he supposed to do?
Yeah, how could he
What
solve that? Or
we
how could he draw light or whatever? Yeah,
we we have
focus.
we have this kind of messiah expectation in our government officials, and of course they aren't going to live up to it.
Right. But then that kind of ties into the point of holidays. Are they culturally driven, or
Hmm.
are they politically or government, like
Yeah,
government laid out?
or union laid out.
Oh yeah.
A lot of like the 3 day weekend holidays came out of the union movement in the early 20th century, and I'm as someone who has some of those days off, I'm super grateful for. It. At the same time, on Labor Day,
Hmm.
are you taking time to sit and have remembrance of
Of all the labor you've done.
of all the people who do labor in society, or are you
Uh-huh.
having a picnic, or on President's Day, are you sitting there and thinking about how George Washington was born on February 20th, and we should have a birthday party for George Washington? No, you're going and buying a mattress.
Uh-huh.
Like we
Uh-huh.
celebrate the fact that we have a 3 day weekend. So the question is, if you were not given a day off, would you still celebrate that holiday? And for some, like Christmas, we
Mhm.
probably would because it's part of our culture and tradition to celebrate that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, National Pretzel Day, which is on April 25th.
Yeah, and then that's the other component is I just called out like the first days of these particular like heritage months and such. I didn't even get into like Pie Day
Or Mario Day, March
or like
10th,
Donut
MAR 10.
Day or like all these other like, so did those come, those aren't government mandated
No, those are
days.
just
Those
kind
are
of fun.
humorous days that came from, I don't know,
And
market.
I feel like I sidetracked us. And
Yes.
my point is just what is the role of our government in dictating what our culture is?
Mhm.
And
Not so
is that
sure
a
about that.
bad thing that they would try to? In this case, I think it's completely benign,
Yeah.
and it's a good faith attempt to solve a problem that cannot be solved from the executive branch of the federal government. But at the same
Yeah.
time,
Yeah,
what?
like there's no ill, yeah, I agree. There's no ill will toward it, but I think it has a lot of potential as me being an individual feeling cynical because someone put on my calendar that I'm supposed to observe this, like I ought to know details about this topic.
Hmm.
It's like, you ought to know this, right?
Right. Yeah. And how dare you say you ought to know?
Yes.
Looking at you, Alanis Morissette.
It's just, yes, yes, exactly. Like, it's, it's, I mean, it
The,
ties into the whole information age that we're in. Like, there is a sense of like, if I'm missing out, like, 24-hour news cycle and this and that and internet and information, we ought to be up to date on all the things going on.
mhm,
And for me, I think my reaction comes partly from a spot of like, I don't feel like someone approached, like, I don't have a friend with Asian Pacific heritage that I know of. And I have never had the opportunity to have just a conversation about that topic. And I would almost be like I would feel off put to, or I would feel uncomfortable walking up to someone if I knew, like a friend, and being like, hey, today's Asian Pacific Heritage Month.
well, because
How are you
you're a little
doing?
bit saying that you're identifying this person solely with their race, but that's
And I would be
not a bad
uncomfortable,
thing.
but I would be uncomfortable, like, because the only reason why I did it is because it was a holiday called
Yes.
out, versus like having an organic conversation or like
Right.
an actual friendship with someone
Yeah.
and a relationship with someone
But
that calls for that
it is valid
conversation.
to a person who you're close enough with
Yes,
to acknowledge that they are a different race and that that matters
100%.
and their lived experience is different than yours.
Uh huh.
It's way different to find a black guy at the grocery store
Yes.
and start talking to him about Black History Month
Yeah.
because you don't have a relationship with that person.
And so that's where I struggle with these random holiday or appreciation month, is that I don't know how to tangibly engage or tangibly do something with that
Hmm.
observance. I know in school, right? Like they like they're teaching, they learn on these topics and it's part of the curriculum,
That's actually a really good
but
point.
otherwise,
No, this wasn't part of our pre notes. This is just you brought up schools, and I wonder if that's actually I've been kind of poo pooing this idea because it smells like virtue signaling. That example I
mm,
gave of the person running for reelection and being able to say, "Look at this holiday I created." That is textbook virtue signaling. However,
mhm,
there could be a more actually uh,
positive,
not yet. I'm not gonna
I'm gonna
describe a
call it
positive
positive or
or a
negative,
negative.
valid.
I'm
Okay,
just
fine.
saying an effective
Yeah.
use for this, which is to say, I want every student in the country to spend a month talking about Pacific Islander heritage.
Yeah.
How can I do that? Well, I don't, as the federal
So maybe
government.
the government has that tied in with the school system.
Well, not even tied in, but if
But
they dictate that out that this is this what this month is about,
right.
schools are gonna pick up on it because schools have a lot of time to fill
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they need stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
And so
So maybe, yeah, maybe it helps or it ties in.
influence,
Yeah,
lessons on these topics. And again, I'm not going to ascribe a good or a bad thing about that,
right.
but it is a thing. Like our kid came home with a bunch of president stuff around President's Day,
Mhm.
which was cool because like it was a lot of early presidents, and I spent some time history buffing on that stuff for a phase of my life. So I'm like, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I know
like
who these people are.
and for Black History Month, like he learned about the inventor of the stoplight.
Yeah, who was a black guy. And what was really cool about that was that nowhere on there was it even mentioned that he was black.
Like it was obvious by the way he colored
Uh
the
huh.
inventor, but it wasn't the focus. It was like this person
Nothing in the
invented a really
literature
cool
he
thing.
gave even mentioned it, which I don't even I think maybe going too far to not even mention it, but it
Yeah.
was clear that they were trying to highlight a figure who did something great in history.
Mhm.
Uh, and and yeah, I'm sure he would want to be remembered for his successes, not his race.
Yeah.
I say that never having
Not
met the
knowing the
guy,
person.
but
Yes.
I have to think.
Yeah.
Uh,
Like he would be grateful that someone thanked him for creating a stoplight.
yes, and the countless lives that guy saved. Uh, so I do think that there might be an actual effort to influence curriculum in these, and
Yeah, maybe that's a tied idea that we actually,
yeah,
yeah, we didn't have going into this episode, but that
yeah,
comes to mind.
that's valid.
But hmm, still, it's I think the part for me that my biggest hesitation or my biggest holdback is I simply struggle with what's mine to do. How
Hmm.
do I apply this
Hmm.
for me?
Because if you have something that's yours to do, you're going to apply and you're going to apply it right now, because that's who you are.
Mhm.
And so if you're given something that you can't do something immediately with,
Yeah, it actually
it's a
causes
dissonance.
yes, it causes dissonance. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And so this is an example of like this just causes dissonance for me because I wouldn't know how to like draw attention if I didn't already know or had a relationship like we already discussed with someone to even be like, "Oh, I appreciate this." Because I mean, an example for International Women's Day,
You're a
um
woman. We can celebrate that.
and I specifically I didn't put like I didn't promote myself for that. And
I thought about buying you like a uterus shaped cake for it,
oh
but
my gosh, you're terrible. But I did one of our friends from college who's a pilot in South Florida and just had a baby shower on a cruise ship, and that captain of the cruise ship is a lady as well, and she has a pretty cool Instagram and following. And so she put out a video just saying like, "Hey, I met this pilot when she was an apprentice, and how cool is that? We got to celebrate her baby shower on the cruise ship this weekend before all the passengers got on." And it was like, it was a nice way of tying it into International Women's Day. And I actually knew, like, I know the person. So I felt a
yeah.
connection there versus just like virtue
And
signaling or
our
propping
joy
myself
of
up,
seeing that had more to do with seeing people who we are friends with doing
doing cool
something
stuff.
that's cool.
Yeah.
And it's nothing to do with, can you believe that she drove a boat and she's a woman? I didn't know women could do that. They have a vagina and everything, and they can still drive.
Yeah.
Can you believe they overcame having boobs to be able to reach the helm? It's amazing. I didn't know they could do that.
Right. It's just like,
But no,
it's not the main point. At least for me, it doesn't
she's
feel
our
like the main
friend,
point.
and she
Yeah.
did something neat,
Yes.
and we think that's awesome.
And it's like, like, does that downplay like the point of like, I don't know, like
Hmm.
breaking ceilings? I don't know. Maybe, but maybe not. So it's like,
Uh, yeah.
that's maybe here nor there. But yeah, I'm curious. So, for the listeners out there, I will throw up an Instagram post after this goes live and asking you, is this something that challenges you? Do you feel a sense of dissonance for these appreciation holidays? Have you ever actually enjoyed them or
Yeah.
done
Do
something
you observe
productive with
them in
them and
some way?
observed it?
Or
Yeah.
do you, like me, just see them
Not
as a
even pay
benign
attention.
thing? And if you do see it as that kind of benign thing, does that undermine, does that actually do more harm than good at that point? Because you
Like
are
having indifference.
actively, specifically inactively,
Mm-hmm.
you are specifically being indifferent to
Mm-hmm.
women in March.
Yeah.
And is that actively harmful? I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of nuance in it.
Yes. Agreed. With that, we'll call it a wrap.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
All right. This is the part of the podcast where we recommend a book for this week.
Yes, and as a reminder, the intent is not necessarily to make this a book club or that you read every single book we suggest every week.
No, that'd be entirely too many books. All this is just coming from the fact that a lot of the conversations we've had and the conversations that we've wanted to share have come from books that we've read and topics that we enjoy. So, with all the books out there, sometimes it's hard to choose what you like. So, this is our contribution.
Yeah, and we generally hope that it ties in a little bit with the episode.
All right, everybody. We really struggled to come up with a holiday themed book this week, but we did mention President's Day. And although I can't say I've ever put up a President's Day tree or saying President's Day carols or been resentful for having to work on President's Day, I did make it a point where I decided, well, I'm getting to be a middle-aged white man, so I guess I'm supposed to learn about American history. Most guys start in World War II, but I thought I'd start in the beginning. Uh, and I had seen this book on a bookshelf called 1776 by David McCullough, and I thought, that's it, that's the one, because that's the beginning, right? It turns out 1776 was actually a companion book for David McCullough's John Adams. 1776 just goes through like 6 battles of the American Revolution in excruciating detail, and I do not recommend it unless you're a real hardcore nut on American history. But what I do recommend is David McCullough's John Adams. And now, I didn't set out to, this is going to sound silly, I didn't set out to find this book interesting. I just set out to find this book instructive. But what I found was a very different perspective on education than I expected. You know, I grew up in a very constitutionalist, conservative home, and you know we assume the planks of the platforms of today were carried all the way back to the beginning, because as conservatives we start to think of things like, oh, we're the way we think the way we do because this is the way they thought in the beginning. But what I was shocked at, shocked is maybe too strong of a word, was the support of liberal education for all people. Like universal liberal education was a mainstay of John Adams's belief on a future society. He's like, no, you should be learning Latin and you should be reading philosophy as a central part of your education and expansion as a person. Which, as someone who went to a military trade school, is just this side of blasphemy. Uh, but here I am reading about this titan of American history, and he was, for his short of stature, a titan of American history who made a really strong case for liberal arts education. And that was hard for me to reckon with. But it really kind of brought me around to a different way of thinking of education. Maybe in a world where college didn't cost so dang much, I could still be more on board with liberal arts education. But all that's to say, if you do have an interest in having an interest in American history, I recommend a good place to start, believe it or not, is with our nation's second president, John Adams, a biography written by David.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you aren't already following us, please follow us on your Spotify or Apple Podcast account. And look us up on Instagram at nuanced_beauty. Until next week.